What if the most powerful World War II movies weren't made in Hollywood, but in Japan, by filmmakers who risked everything to show war from the other side? For decades, Japanese cinema tore up the rule book and rewrote what war stories could be. But have you ever really seen the war through their eyes? Why do these movies still haunt directors everywhere? Stick around, because what you think you know about World War II movies is about to be flipped on its head. The Human Condition Trilogy, 1959 to 1961. Ready for a cinematic gut punch? The Human Condition Trilogy isn't just a war film. It's a 9-hour odyssey that takes you straight into the soul of a man, and honestly, the conscience of an entire country. Directed by Masaki Kobayashi, this trilogy didn't just break the mold, it melted it down, stomped on it, and threw it out the window. Meet Kaji, an ordinary man caught up in the meat grinder of war. He's got ideals, he wants to treat people decently, and he believes one person can make a difference. But the war machine doesn't care about hope or morals. Across 3 sprawling films, Kaji goes from overseeing labor camps in Manchuria to getting drafted, to fighting for survival in the Soviet Gulag. And with each step, you watch his optimism get chipped away, one impossible choice at a time. What makes the Human Condition legendary isn't just its epic scale or brutal honesty, it's the way Kobayashi zooms in on the personal, the small betrayals, the quiet moments of decency, and the relentless question, can you keep your humanity when the world turns savage? Audiences had never seen anything like it, and neither had filmmakers. This trilogy didn't just influence Japanese directors, it stunned a young Martin Scorsese and Spielberg, both of whom called it one of the most important anti-war works ever made. By the time the final credits roll, you're left wondering if morality is a blessing or a curse, and that's the legacy. The Human Condition Trilogy doesn't just show the cost of war, it makes you feel every penny of it. Fires on the Plain, Nobi, 1959. Ever think a war film could be so intense you'd forget you were watching actors and not survivors? That's Fires on the Plain for you, a movie that kicks you in the teeth, then politely invites you to watch the end of civilization from the front row. Director Kon Ichikawa doesn't waste time on glory or heroics. Instead, you're thrown into the filthy, feverish world of a Japanese soldier stranded in the Philippines as the war falls apart. Supplies are gone. Commanders have vanished. It's every man for himself, and Fires on the Plain isn't afraid to show just how ugly that gets. Starvation, disease, madness, nothing's off the table in this brutal masterpiece. And while most war movies end with a victory march, this one leaves you with a hollow ache. Here's the real twist. Fires on the Plain is less about the battlefield and more about the battlefield inside the human mind. Ichikawa takes you on a slow-motion collapse, showing what happens when rules and morals dissolve, and survival is all that matters. Japanese audiences were shocked, some even called it unpatriotic, but overseas critics saw the film's raw honesty for what it was, a breakthrough in war cinema. This movie inspired a new wave of filmmakers to dig deeper and get real. Its influence is all over later classics, and it made it clear that sometimes the truest stories aren't pretty, but they're unforgettable. Watching Fires on the Plain is like witnessing the death of innocence, and you'll never look at a war movie the same way again. Grave of the Fireflies, 1988. Forget everything you know about animated films. Grave of the Fireflies doesn't do fairy tales or talking animals. It grabs your heart and doesn't let go. Directed by Isao Takahata, this Studio Ghibli classic rewrote what animation could do, and it's not for the faint of heart. Set during the firebombing of Kobe, the story follows Seida and his little sister Setsuko as they try to survive in the ruins of World War II Japan. Sounds simple, right? But here's the kicker. You've never seen a movie that makes childhood feel so fragile or war so crushing. With every frame, Takahata serves up moments of hope and heartbreak that feel way too real for a cartoon. It's the details that wreck you, the cracked rice bowls, the jar of candy, the desperation in Seida's eyes as he tries to protect his sister when the world turns cold. There are no big battles, just the daily struggle to find food, shelter, and a reason to keep going. The animation brings a kind of brutal beauty to the devastation, and by the time the fireflies fade, you'll understand why audiences around the world have called this one of the greatest anti-war films ever made. Grave of the Fireflies wasn't just a hit with critics, it changed how people saw animation itself. No more just for kids labels. Now, the world knew cartoons could carry the weight of real history and real pain. If you want a war movie that will stick with you forever, this is it. The Burmese Harp, 1956. Here's a movie that takes the chaos of war and flips it into something almost meditative. The Burmese Harp is the war film that quietly sneaks up and floors you. Director Kon Ichikawa, yes, the same genius from Fires on the Plain, brings a whole new vibe to the war genre, using music, silence, and sweeping landscapes to tell a story about conscience in a time of collapse. The plot follows a group of Japanese soldiers stranded in Burma at the end of World War II. But instead of gunfights and glory, the heart of the film is Mizushima, a soldier with a harp and a soul too big for all the violence around him. When his squad is captured, Mizushima is sent on a mission that changes everything. He sees the unburied dead, the devastation, and realizes that war doesn't just end when the fighting stops. What follows is a journey of self-discovery, compassion, and a desperate search for redemption in a world that's forgotten how to forgive. What makes The Burmese Harp so groundbreaking? It's the way Ichikawa ditches cheap thrills and gives us raw, quiet humanity. The music isn't just a soundtrack, it's a lifeline, a way for soldiers to hold on to hope when everything else has been stripped away. Western critics were floored, Japanese audiences wept. The film's gentle, pacifist tone and spiritual heart made it a hit at Cannes and turned the idea of the war movie into something far more powerful than just bullets and battlefields. Bottom line, The Burmese Harp shows that even in the ashes, there's room for kindness, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put down your weapon. Black Rain, Kuroi Amy, 1989. Just when you think you've seen every angle on World War II, along comes Black Rain, the film that dares to look straight into the atomic aftermath and refuses to blink. Director Shohei Imamura takes us deep into Hiroshima, not during the bombings, but in the haunted days and years that followed. The result? A movie that stares right back at history's darkest moments and demands you do the same. Black Rain centers on Yasuko and her family, who survive the blast only to find themselves living in a new kind of nightmare. The film doesn't rely on spectacle or special effects. Instead, it uses everyday life, slow dread, and quiet heartbreak to show the real cost of survival. Radiation sickness becomes a ghost that follows every character, and hope is rationed out like precious rice. There's no easy catharsis, just the constant push to keep going, keep loving, and keep remembering. What sets Black Rain apart isn't just its subject matter, but its refusal to sugarcoat anything. Imamura gives us stunning black and white visuals, making post-war Japan look both beautiful and ruined at the same time. Critics and audiences worldwide took notice, and the film went on to win awards at Cannes. More importantly, Black Rain shattered the silence around nuclear fallout and inspired other filmmakers, both in Japan and beyond, to finally tackle the stories people were too scared to tell. If you want to know what resilience really looks like, Black Rain is required viewing. It doesn't just show history, it makes you live it. Oba, The Last Samurai, 2011. What happens when surrender is not an option and the war refuses to end, even after everyone else has given up? That's the wild, true-life saga at the heart of Oba The Last Samurai, one of Japan's most gripping World War II survival stories, and a film that finally gives the legendary Captain Sakai Oba his due. The story kicks off on the scorched island of Saipan in 1944, after the U.S. military declares victory and most Japanese forces are wiped out. But one man, Captain Oba, won't have it. Rallying a ragtag band of 46 soldiers and more than 200 civilians, he melts into the jungle and begins a shadow war that baffles the Americans for over 16 months. Forget straightforward combat, this is guerrilla warfare at its most desperate and inventive, with Oba's men dodging capture, raiding for supplies, and outwitting a technologically superior enemy day after day. The film doesn't sugarcoat the brutal conditions or the constant threat of starvation and exposure. What shines through instead is Oba's iron will and the strange camaraderie that forms among those who refuse to surrender, even as the world changes around them. The Americans call him the Fox for a reason. He's always one step ahead, and the cat-and-mouse tension is relentless. But here's what sets Oba, The Last Samurai, apart. It's not just about stubbornness or glory, it's about dignity, humanity, and the agony of letting go. Oba finally surrendered in December 1945, months after Japan's official surrender, marking one of the war's last holdouts. The film turned this little-known chapter into a legend, reminding audiences that sometimes the most unforgettable battles happen after the war is supposed to be over, and that courage can be both a shield and a curse. Letters from Iwo Jima 2006. How often does Hollywood step aside and let another country tell its own war story, especially about World War II? Letters from Iwo Jima is that rare gem, a big-budget American film directed by Clint Eastwood that flips the script and shows the iconic battle entirely from the Japanese perspective. But don't let the director's name fool you. This is a Japanese movie in spirit, heart, and voice. Forget flag-waving propaganda. This film gives the enemy a name, a family, and a soul. Ken Watanabe leads an all-Japanese cast as General Kuribayashi, tasked with defending Iwo Jima against overwhelming American forces. But what really sets Letters from Iwo Jima apart is its focus on letters written by the doomed soldiers, real people with hopes, fears, and regrets buried in the sands alongside their bodies. The film's tone is stark, somber, and deeply human. We watch as friendships form and shatter, as courage flickers in the face of impossible odds, and as every character is stripped down to their rawest selves. Instead of faceless enemies, we meet bakers, fathers, and sons, all caught up in history's machinery. Critics and audiences around the globe were stunned. The film swept awards, shattered box office records, and, most importantly, helped crack open the conversation about seeing the other side as human. Its legacy is huge. After Letters from Iwo Jima, directors everywhere realized war stories don't have to have good guys and bad guys, just people trying to survive. It's a cinematic olive branch, and it changed the way World War II is told forever. The Eternal Zero, I and No Zero, 2013. Get ready for a story that'll split the room. The Eternal Zero is one of the most controversial and highest-grossing Japanese war movies ever. It's got kamikaze pilots, generational guilt, and enough emotional dynamite to launch 1,000 debates. No wonder it sparked heated arguments on everything from patriotism to memory. Director Takashi Yamazaki spins the story around Kentaro, a young man in 2004 digging into the mystery of his grandfather, Kyuzo Miyabe. As he uncovers the past through interviews and flashbacks, the audience is transported into the cockpit with Miyabe and his fellow pilots, facing the terrifying reality of Japan's infamous kamikaze missions. But here's where things get thorny. The Eternal Zero dares to paint its lead not as a mindless zealot, but as a thoughtful, even reluctant pilot, a man who treasures life, resists suicide attacks, and pays the price for it. His fellow pilots see him as a coward, but the film asks, what's braver, following orders or questioning them? Yamazaki wraps the narrative in a blockbuster spectacle, but never loses sight of the moral complexity. Audiences in Japan lined up around the block, while critics and historians everywhere argued over what the film was really saying. Did it glorify the past? Did it challenge it? Whatever your take, The Eternal Zero made it impossible to look away. The film forced a new conversation about how nations remember war and made it clear that World War II stories are never, ever simple. Otokotachi no Yamato, Men of the Yamato, 2005. You want intensity? Men of the Yamato delivers it by the shipload. This isn't a dry history lesson. It's an emotional deep dive into loyalty, brotherhood, and the staggering cost of duty. Forget faceless uniforms. This film makes every sailor count, every sacrifice matter, and every explosion feel personal. Directed by Junya Sato, the same hand behind Yamato, the movie follows the infamous battleship's final voyage through the eyes of the men who lived and died on board. Flashbacks drive the story, connecting survivors and families to a past they can't escape. Sato's focus isn't just on military action, though there's plenty of it. It's on the lives upended by war, the friendships forged under fire, and the pain that never really goes away. Men of the Yamato is loaded with detail, from the sweat and grime below deck to the roaring chaos of battle above. But what really sets it apart is the way it humanizes history. You're not watching statistics, you're watching sons, brothers, and friends forced to face the end together. It's a film about remembering, about carrying the burden of those who didn't make it home. Critics praised its realism and emotional punch, and Japanese audiences responded with tears and gratitude. For anyone who thinks war movies are all about strategy and spectacle, this one proves it's the stories of ordinary people that stick with you. Men of the Yamato turns a battleship into a symbol, not just of power, but of heartbreak and hope. The Wind Rises, 2013. How do you tell a war story without a single battlefield? Leave it to Hayao Miyazaki to show everyone how it's done. The Wind Rises is as much about dreams as it is about destruction, a stunning animated biopic that proves World War II movies can be gentle, beautiful, and absolutely devastating all at once. The film centers on Jiro Horikoshi, a young man obsessed with flight. He's got a mind for engineering, a love for airplanes, and a talent that takes him straight to the top, designing Japan's legendary Zero fighter. But here's the twist. The Wind Rises isn't about dogfights or military glory. It's about the agony and ecstasy of creating something beautiful, only to see it used for something terrible. Miyazaki fills every frame with lush landscapes, soaring music, and heartbreaking tenderness. We follow Jiro as he chases his dreams, falls in love, and struggles with the knowledge that his creations are fueling a war he can't control. The film asks tough questions. Can genius be innocent? Is it possible to pursue your passion when the world is burning? The answers aren't simple, and that's the point. The Wind Rises shattered box office records in Japan and wowed critics worldwide. It brought adults to tears, sparked debates, and made it clear animation isn't just for kids, and war stories aren't just about fighting. Sometimes they're about the price of genius and the winds of history that carry us, whether we want them to or not. So, which of these Japanese World War II films caught you off guard or changed the way you see history? These movies didn't just shake up Japanese cinema, they tore down walls, challenged old ideas, and forced audiences to confront the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. If you've got a favorite or a story to share, hit the comments, subscribe, and join the debate. One thing's for sure, when you see war through these eyes, you'll never see it the same way again.